I know it's not been 1 year yet since Forza Motorsport released, but it has been exactly 1 year since my first video on the game. Today we're gonna take a look back at what we knew back then, how the game launched and where we're at today. Even though I know being negative on the game would work very well on YouTube, this is not gonna be that kind of video. I'm gonna talk about things that I think are wrong with the game, but I'm not gonna complain and trash talk Forza Motorsport. Instead, we're also gonna focus on things that we now take for granted, but that were huge improvements over any previous Forza Motorsport. Oh, but we are gonna trash talk my old video. So let's start off by letting my old self introduce today's topic. Hello and welcome to HD Racing. A new Forza Motorsport is right around the corner and will be released on the 10th of October, with early access already starting on the 5th on PC and Xbox Series consoles. But what can you actually expect from this 6 years in development racing giant? Okay, maybe it's not as bad as I remembered it being, but even still I think you can see that my talking and presenting style has evolved a bit over the year that I've now been doing YouTube videos. And that's also something that I want to kind of celebrate with this video. As I said, it's been exactly 1 year since I started doing YouTube properly. I had some videos up on the channel before, but with this video I started my journey on this YouTube channel. And I really want to thank all of you that have been with me, be that for this whole year or if you joined at some point along the line. I am very grateful to have you all here and watching and enjoying my videos, and also interacting through liking, sharing and in the comment section down below. That always means a lot to me, and as you probably know, I read all of your comments and I try to reply to almost every single one as well. So yeah, I'm really thankful for all of your support. But let's now get into the subject of today's video, Forza Motorsport. And we'll go section by section in my very first video on Forza Motorsport. Let's start with what I consider the most important aspect of any racing game, the way it handles on the track. Yeah, I still would agree, handling is the most important aspect of any racing game. And I think the handling is what Forza Motorsport does best. For me, it's the perfect blend between the more accessible driving of Forza Horizon and the more inaccessible, or let's say difficult, driving model of games like ACC. Forza Motorsport handles very well on controller and on steering wheel, so I think they really nailed this. The only criticism I would have is that setting up your wheels force feedback in Forza Motorsport is a little bit of a hassle and could be a lot easier. There are just too many sliders which you have to play around with a lot to get the feel that you want out of your steering wheel. But to me that's a minor thing, and I would say that Forza Motorsport improved the handling over Forza Motorsport 7 by quite a bit. And we're now gonna get to our first point here that we now take for granted. The driving assists, like stability or traction control, or more notably ABS, do not artificially slow you down anymore. I think this change has been huge to the accessibility of Forza Motorsport. And by the way, speaking of accessibility, the accessibility option also have been expanded quite a lot for this new iteration of Forza Motorsport, giving even more people the chance to play a track racing game like Forza Motorsport. So, even 1 year ago, when the game wasn't even out to the general public yet, I was quite optimistic about the handling, and I think I was right about that. To this day, I believe that the handling is what Forza Motorsport does best. Next up, tracks and cars. With regards to the 20 tracks that the game shipped with, I think I was totally right in saying, this is okay, but not really all that impressive. Wow, so much emotion in that, right? And where am I looking, by the way? I know I was looking at my script, but with the camera being where it was and the script being on my screen, it really looks a little bit weird what I'm doing in this video. So I think I also improved that if I even have the camera on in videos nowadays. But yeah, back to the tracks. I think it's fair to say that the initial track list was quite underwhelming. Since then, we've gotten Yas Marina, Hockenheim, Daytona, the Nürburgring Nordschleife, Brands Hatch, Sebring and Road Atlanta. That's 7 tracks since launch, and 2 more tracks are already confirmed for October, which is Sunset Peninsula, and Mount Panorama, so Bathurst, in December. And in my opinion, the tracklist now is pretty good for a racing game like Forza Motorsport. Yes, of course, there are still tracks that I would like to see, like Monza for example, but I'm quite confident that they will keep adding tracks like they've been doing over the last year. And with all of those added tracks being free, I think it's a very fair model that Forza Motorsport is running here. I mean, we all know the sim racing titles that add new tracks to their games and then charge a whole load of money for them. One thing that I need to talk about here that was a huge upgrade over all the previous Forza Motorsport titles and that we now take for granted is A, the track limits are now pretty accurate, and they removed the stupid tire walls that were there in all the previous games. And for me personally, that's a huge deal because it makes the tracks just way more real and believable. We also now have dynamic time of day, weather and track conditions for every track, which is also a huge upgrade to the previous titles. When we talk about cars, I think I would still agree with my one-year-old self that the car list at launch was pretty good and they have been adding some cars, though I think I would like to see a little bit more and especially more recent cars that actually are racing right now in real life. The cars that we've gotten in the previous year haven't really gotten my hopes up on that, but maybe we'll see some more recent cars in the future. Next, let's talk about single player. This is one topic where I think I was too optimistic when looking at what we knew already and what footage we had seen from the Builders Cup, which is the main single player of Forza Motorsport. Because after describing what the Builders Cup is about, I said this. I think this whole setup looks quite good and will probably entertain me for quite a while. Well, sadly it didn't. Both because of two other topics we're going to talk about, AI and the progression system, but also because there is no real reason for me to play these events because I don't feel like they have any structure that's keeping them together. There is no story and no through line through all of these. And additionally, it's basically almost only street cars and no race cars. I mean, that's gonna change a little bit in the future with some of the feature tours being added to the Builders Cup, but still the Builders Cup as a single player experience just isn't for me. Let me know in the comments down below if you enjoy the single player experience of the Builders Cup and why. I would really like to know. But let's now turn our attention to one of the problem aspects that's still persisting in single player, AI. This is another topic where I think I was just too optimistic and just believing too much of what was said by the developers of Forza Motorsport before the game was released. Yes, the AI definitely is a lot better than in the previous games. It is a lot faster, it doesn't cheat anymore, there is no rubber banding. That is definitely awesome. But sadly, I have to say that racing against AI still is not fun for me. They are just too dumb, sometimes too aggressive, and just overall don't lend themselves to a very fun single player experience, at least for me. I mean, there were some improvements to the AI over the course of the year, but this is one area of the game which I feel like has a long way to go still. And while we're at it with criticizing aspects of the game, let's next talk about progression. I think everyone that played Forza Motorsport on release knows how bad this was. And even I, before the game released, was saying this. Progression is one of the most controversial topics of everything we know about the game. Because it was. It was probably the most controversial topic when it was originally shown. And people were begging and pleading Turn 10 to change this before release. Sadly, they didn't. So we got this grindy system where you had to drive the car for quite a while before you were even able to put any upgrades in. Not only was this very limiting, it also made the single player experience of the Builders Cup not very fun, because at the end of one of these tours you barely had any upgrades in your car because you just hadn't progressed anywhere with the car. But even though the outcry before the game launched was not enough, I think the outcry after the launch of the game was eventually enough for Turn 10 to finally change this system. And I think what we have now is probably the best compromise. You can still progress by leveling the car, but if you don't want to, then you just buy car points and it's not very expensive, so you can upgrade basically any car to whatever you want. And I think the system now is totally fine. It also means that now the Open Series in multiplayer is something that I'm actually interested in doing, because it's very easy to just build up a car, try it, and then maybe rebuild it if it's not right. And that leads us nicely into the next topic, tuning and customization. I think here I would once again agree with my sentiment from 1 year ago. The tuning and customization is still very good. It always was one of the strengths of the Forza Motorsport series, and they also did some nice improvements on it. For example, in the tuning section, the force feedback scaling and wheel rotation for steering wheel users is awesome to see. Customization wise, I would once again agree with my old self that it's totally fine, but we would like to get away from the old Forza wing at some point, but that doesn't seem to be in our cards right now. What we did get over any of the previous Forza Motorsport titles, and that's once again something that we now take for granted, is fuel levels and different tire compounds, both soft, mediums, hards and also wet tires. And with that comes the addition of pit stops. That, in my opinion, has added so much to the multiplayer side of things, with the addition of strategy now affecting the outcome of your race. And that now lets us transition nicely into the topic of multiplayer. While I know some people still prefer the old system of multiplayer, I myself am very happy with the general layout of the multiplayer in Forza Motorsport. The addition of the Spec Series multiplayer races with touring cars, GTs and also a lot of other rotating ones for me is the best thing about the multiplayer of Forza Motorsport. And while there are some minor issues in terms of balancing, for example, for me that doesn't detract from the fun of this part of multiplayer. The Open Class series, on the other hand, in the beginning was very limited. There was only one PI class per week, which wasn't really all that fun for most people. Luckily, that has changed over time, and we are now at a point where, in my opinion, we have more than enough open series going on at the same time. The structure of one event in the multiplayer is something that I did not foresee being problematic, with having practice, with qualifying mixed first and then the race, but that actually did create a little bit of a problem in terms of matchmaking, because you are being matched quite early on instead of being matched right before the race when there is most people basically in a queue for an event. That is something that I hope Turn 10 will address in the future, so we can then have better matchmaking in the future using the ratings that we have in game. Speaking of, ratings and regulations are sadly still a highly debated topic. Skill rating just seems too easy to get, and safety rating just doesn't seem to mean very much. While the idea was very good by the developers, I think the implementation is still lacking. And that also goes for the race regulations, which seemed like an amazing system when it was announced, but sadly it doesn't work all the time and you still get penalties for things that you shouldn't get a penalty for. It's something that the developers stated that they still need to work on, and I hope that they do and will succeed, because if it works, this is probably one of the best systems to detect incidents in any racing game so far, where you don't just get a penalty because you were involved in any incident, even if you were not at fault. Time will tell if we ever get there, but I think the system as a whole has evolved at least a bit over the past year. And that already brings us to the last chapter of my very first Forza Motorsport video: graphics and sound. I already said back then that graphics are not the most important part of a racing game for me. I went on to saying, the only part that is really important to me in terms of graphics is performance. And I stand by that. Performance for me is the most important part. And that sadly, at least on PC, was lacking in the beginning. It really seemed like the developers, in trying to get the game out on time, focused heavily on consoles. And while even those had some issues in the beginning, the most prevalent issues were on PC. Performance was just all over the place. Even on high-end systems, people were sometimes just barely able to get to 60 FPS, which really shouldn't be the case. This was the one thing that showed, at least to me, that the game really wasn't ready to release when it did. Luckily, over the first months of the game being out, the developers continued working on these issues, and I think at the end of the last year we got to a point where the game was performing decently well. I still think that performance is not where it should be, especially if you compare Forza Motorsport to something like Forza Horizon 5, which has similar graphical fidelity but is set in an open world and runs a lot smoother on a lot of systems. Similarly, in the sound department, I think I personally still prefer Forza Horizon 5, but that doesn't mean that the sound in Forza Motorsport is bad. It's actually pretty good, I think. And that's already everything we knew back then. I personally think Forza Motorsport has come a long way in the almost a year that it's now been out. It also at the same time still has a long way to go. But if the developers keep listening to the community and actually implement stuff that we as players want, like for example the proximity radar that we've gotten that I really didn't think would come to Forza Motorsport, then I think Forza Motorsport still has a bright future ahead of itself. But let me know what you think. And thanks again for being on this 1 year long journey with me on this YouTube channel. And I think I'll let my old self sign us out here. I've been HD Racing. Thank you for watching. Well, okay, maybe not. So thanks a lot for watching. I've been HD Racing. See you in the next one.